You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we are your hosts for this show. And as David Sumler Jr. just chatted in, because sorry we're a little bit late, it is indeed game time. That's right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's good to see you with us, David. And everybody that's joining us tonight, because once again, we had a really hard time narrowing down what we wanted to talk about. I mean, there's just so many things. And then, of course, as I was scrambling to get back, again, sorry I was late, guys, but long day at work, and I looked up and I realized what time it was, and I scrambled to get back here. But I'm here, only a few minutes late, so that's all good. But in that time, as I was trying to let you know that I'd be on soon, you ended up texting me a bunch of stuff. I mean, a Karate Kid movie, the Andor first reactions, which I didn't access any of them, but I did see them, as in, you know, some people were talking about it on YouTube or something. Campy actually says that it plays out more like an HBO drama than a Disney Plus show, which that's great news. Some other things that, what was the other thing you sent me too? It was, oh, here, let me look.
It was the reactions. There was reactions to Andor.
Well,
of course,
yeah, I guess that was it. Yeah, that and the new Karate Kid thing, which is non-Star Wars related, but definitely something we would look forward to. So I'll have to read all that when I have time. But tonight, there's just like a couple of things that are just making us ask, what is up with Star Wars lately, right? Well, this is something that we've been talking about for a while now. And
we talked about our last show.
Yeah, actually, you're right. In fact, I think we spent a lot of time with it on our last show, to be honest, where we were just wondering what was going on. Because, of course, first we had the whole Bad Batch thing. That was taken off the schedule. Then it was briefly put back on the schedule for September, and then it's been moved to, what did we say? It was like end of January, I think.
January 4th.
Is it? Is it that early? I thought it was like in the 20-something, but either way, it's, yeah. Well, it's definitely January. I do remember that much, because Mandalorian is February. So thought this would be a good time, because I know you sent over the new casting announcement, you know, for Ezra, which was not Mina Masood like we thought it was going to be. So, you got anything on this guy? Because I don't actually, I've heard this guy's name before, but I don't remember anything that he's been in or anything like that.
He was in King Richard.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else he might have been in, but I mean, you know, of course, you know, Mina Masood, once this was kind of confirmed, Mina Masood kind of put out like, you know, although he really wanted to be in a Star Wars movie, you know, and, you know, apparently he didn't get the role of Ezra as we would have hoped. You know, he was like, well, I'm kind of finally glad that, you know, the rumors and everything can stop, and, you know, all the speculation and all that stuff is like, he can finally put that to bed that, you know, he's not playing Ezra. Unfortunately, and for those of you who don't know, Mina Masood is the actor who played Aladdin in the live action Disney movie Aladdin. So, we've got this guy. He's, you know, he's coming in to play Ezra Bridger. Now, the question becomes, you know, we've all kind of like, I won't say fallen in love, but we've kind of, I guess we could kind of say that we've kind of fallen in love with the character of Ezra. I mean, it took a while for him to kind of grow on me, but he eventually, you know, grew on me. And towards the end of Rebels, we saw the maturity. You know, it's almost kind of like that Luke Skywalker syndrome, where at first, you know, Luke Skywalker was kind of annoying and a little bit and whiny, but then of course by Return of the Jedi, you know, he's like fully, you know, powerful and kicking butt.
Right.
So now that we have an older Ezra, well, because when we last left him, he sacrificed himself to save his friends, so he kind of got shipped off with Thrawn into like the unknown regions. And so now we don't know how old, you know, Ezra is at this point, but you know, we got to believe, you know, he's probably really seasoned at this, at this age, probably like in his 40s or something. So, what do you expect from this type of Ezra?
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. So the actor is Eman Esfandi. He got it over Mina Masood. Now, this is funny because David chatted in and said, was he going to use the Force to fly the magic carpet? Because again,
David.
this is one of those things, and I mean, you guys could see in the graphic the two main things that we're going to be dealing with is Eman's casting, and then of course Rogue Squadron being completely taken off the schedule. But we'll deal with that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what I expect, I mean, and this is one of the reasons why I brought up David's comment, was because I remember you and I, when we first saw season 1 of Rebels, that was a series that we had to grow into. Neither one of us were really all that enthused about it. We thought, okay, maybe it shows a little bit of promise, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. And we actually made those comparisons. We said that, great, it's like Aladdin joined Star Wars or something. I remember, like, he would do these scenes or whatever, and you and I would be like, street rat or whatever. I mean, we would start quoting Aladdin every time Ezra, keep in mind, this is animation, every time that Ezra showed up, because, I mean, he was stealing from, people in the city. It was exactly like how Aladdin was. It was so funny to me. And I just remember thinking, great. I mean, because I was just starting to like Ahsoka by this point. Because remember, I mean, for you, I guess it wasn't as bad. For me, her character really, really ruined a lot of that Clone Wars movie for me. Especially at the time, it seemed over the top. Now, when I ended up rewatching the series, it didn't really bother me as bad. But that's because I had already grown with Ahsoka. So when I went back and started over, it was like, well, all right, this isn't terrible. But again, when you're coming off of episode 3, which we were, and this was a year later, and it was like, great, we get some theatrical thing of Star Wars. Granted, it wasn't a movie, but it was an animated feature, which is basically the first 2 Clone Wars episodes just edited together. But I mean, it was just really something that was driving my excitement level and everything else. And then, she's over there, R2E and Sky Guy, and it's just like, is really, I mean, I get that Star Wars is for kids predominantly, but if you think about the original trilogy, yes, it was for kids. Yes, it appealed to kids. But if you go back and watch it, I mean, it's a timeless thing. It had a moral of the story, but it was timeless.
Well, I think the biggest thing, and you probably can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when people say things are meant for kids, sometimes people try to dumb things down for kids. And I think that's the part that annoyed you. Like it's almost kind of like when people have a baby, and David probably can attest to this as him being a new father, but, a lot of people will talk to their kids and do the whole baby talk thing, like goo goo gaga, oh, what's the matter? Like talking to the baby like that, when it's like, just talk to the baby normal, just regular. When it's like, hey, what's wrong? You okay? Like, you don't have to do this whole, what they deem as cutesy talk to a baby. Just talk to the child, and I think that's the part that even people who like you, who did not like Ahsoka at first, they didn't care for that whole, it felt like you were trying to overemphasize that she was a kid, and it's like, we can see that.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, I think you're right. Actually, I mean, when I really think about what it was, that's probably what it was. They were overemphasizing the fact that she was a kid, because I didn't really have a problem with her in any other way. Really, it was just the way that she was acting, and then of course, as time went on, and she became a little bit more serious and grew into the Ahsoka that everybody knows and loves. I mean, she became one of my favorite characters. That's what's so funny.
Yeah.
It's like she was almost the one that made me not want to watch this show, and she turned into one of my favorite all-time Star Wars characters. How's that for a big turnaround?
Well, yeah, that's true. And I think if you want to draw a big comparison, and it just dawned on me. See, I think the way you wanted Ahsoka to behave is the same way that Omega behaves on Bad Batch. Or,
Yeah.
they didn't do that with Omega, even though she's a kid. They don't bring that whole kitty vibe to her. It's more like she's almost like a very mature kid.
All right, well,
that's kind of where you were going.
Dwight brings up a good discussion point, though. He says, so you guys were upset that a kid was acting like a kid.
I wasn't upset.
Okay, to clarify, it wasn't so much that the kid was acting like a kid. She wasn't a kid in the sense of like 8 or 9 years old. Ahsoka, at the time of the first episode of the Clone Wars, was probably in that 12 to 14-year-old range. And granted, teenage girl. But the problem was, it wasn't correct for in-universe. They were trying to make her act like a 12 to 14-year-old Earth kid. Not a 12 to 14-year-old Jedi Padawan. It was too over the top. It's exactly what you said. It was just, R2E and Sky Guy and all that. You have to do that. Even Jake Lloyd, as a 9-year-old, was also very irritating, by the way. He had a couple of lines.
It's a theme here.
He had a couple of lines, but I mean, it wasn't really quite as bad. And again, my problem overall was that they could have written that character to be about 16 or 17 and it would have been fine. Now, of course, I had since turned around because, like I said, when I rewatched it, it didn't bother me as bad, but you had to put it in the context of where we were at in 2006. And this is a thing that sometimes, and I get this all the time, where me being into Star Wars since 1977, when it first came out, I'll get these people that come into it at different times, and this is a perfect example. Somebody might talk to me in 2022, and I might feel very differently about something in 2022 than I did in 06. Because I was on this ride in 06, right? So after Revenge of the Sith came out, and he announced this whole Clone Wars series, I was ready for more of an extension of the Clone Wars, basically some of the other stuff. And it was the fact that they even wrote this character in the first place. Again, I didn't really have a problem with the fact that Anakin had a Padawan and all this other stuff. But, I would have been a little bit happier if they just hadn't made it so over the top. Because you get a lot of kid characters. You just brought up Omega. That's a perfect example. And she's actually, I think, around the same age or maybe even younger than Ahsoka was. So I mean, it's just one of those things that if you look at the way especially because she was in the Jedi Temple ever since she was practically born, and we're going to see this in Tales of the Jedi, by the way, because they're going to actually go in pretty heavily into Ahsoka's backstory. When you actually look at that, Ahsoka wouldn't act that way. The Jedi are kind of stoic and, I mean, if you're serious. They're serious. If you're raised like that from the very beginning, you're not going to act that way. I mean, Anakin, he was taken in when he was like 9 or 10 years old. She was taken in when she was a baby. So she would have been raised like that from the get-go. So it wasn't so much that she was acting like a kid. It was really over the top and silly. And the problem that I had with it was juxtaposed against this ultra serious tone. It was set in the backdrop of a war. I mean, you're fighting for a cause and all this other stuff, and you're out there, acting like you're on a playground or something. I mean, it was a juxtaposition in the context of that character more so than the character herself. But again, when I actually went back and watched it, and it's through a different lens, obviously, because I had like 6 or 7 seasons of the Clone Wars behind me, and I saw Ahsoka's growth, like I said, it completely changed my mind about the character. She became one of my favorite characters, actually.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing about Star Wars, and that's one of the things, even bringing up Andor, which I'll just even touch on briefly, even though that's not really the subject matter, but it's kind of around the whole the theme of this though is that Star Wars is, because the title is "What's Up with Star Wars," and Star Wars has been moving in very different directions. And so one of them being Andor, which debuts on the 21st of this month. Um, Everybody who's already they lifted the embargo pretty much on people who've already saw Andor, the first couple of episodes, and everybody's been raving about it because of the serious tone that it has. It doesn't, Eric, you mentioned earlier at the top of the show that it has more of that. John Campia mentioned that it has more of an HBO vibe to it, more than a Disney Plus vibe. And some of the things that I've seen so far, everybody's loving it because it's more grounded. It's not dealing with lightsabers and the Force. It's dealing with everyday people, but the struggle of this oppression that's coming upon from the Empire. And people are really kind of getting into it, and a lot of people have said this is what's returning them back to Star Wars. So this is a slow burn, and they're really excited for all the different episodes that's coming up. So when you see things like this, like, okay, I can't remember the gentleman's name because I got Mina Masood in my head so much, but the gentleman who's now being cast as Ezra,
Eman
that's what I'm saying,
Esfandi.
like Eman Esfandi. Okay, and
say it 3 times fast, right?
right, or don't say it in a mirror.
Or just call him just call him Ezra.
Yeah, Ezra.
New guy that's playing Ezra.
But like I said, I think now we're taking a lot of characters that we've all kind of known, and this is something that struck me when I'm looking at this, is that we're seeing the adult versions of them, and they're more mature. Like I said, Ahsoka is very mature now. She's probably at this point maybe in her late 30s, maybe 40s. Ezra is probably around that age as well. By the time we get to the Ahsoka series, so we're seeing these characters now that we've kind of seen develop to some degree as kids, and now we're seeing them now in a more adult lifestyle.
Well, and here's
so
another
I'm wondering
thing
what
too.
that's going to look like.
Yeah, no, and I'll get to that in a second too, because I know that was the original question that started this whole little rabbit hole we went down. But the other thing is, here's the thing. So I actually really enjoyed Star Wars Visions. Star Wars Visions is extremely kid-like, to the point where a lot of Star Wars fans wouldn't even watch it because it was just so kiddie, But that's the context that it was in. And that's why I didn't, none of those characters really drove me insane. Now, this is something funny from Voyager. This is awesome. He says, take a shot every time someone describes Andor as real and gritty, you'll be plastered. Yeah, right? All
you said take a shot. You didn't say a what.
Take a shot. Yeah, you didn't say a what. Because we already used that. We probably used that like several times today, so that was it. But I mean, no, and I understand what you're saying because, again, people tend to jump on those bandwagons, and that's one of the things. But again, I think also that it actually separates it from some of the other Star Wars stuff because, like you just brought up, I actually think that this is probably the first Star Wars project that was meant to be completely adult. It's not incorporating anything, quote unquote, for the kids. By the way, Dwight says, I'll take that shot. Everybody's going to. But hey, you know what? In your inebriated state, make sure you hit that like button. Got people like watching. I don't see any likes yet, so let's go. Seriously, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button.
Chug and push.
Chug and push, exactly. But I think that one of the surprising things about Andor and the production of it, even though it's a perfect subject matter for this, which is something that you and I had talked about in the past as well, is that finally, I think that Lucasfilm is actually understanding that you can make the stuff that's sort of like middle of the road, right? Basically what Lucas established. You have stuff that's for everybody. It's themed towards kids with the moral of the story and all that stuff, but it appeals to adults and children alike. Then you have the stuff like maybe Star Wars Resistance, And Resistance is, again, that's the show. There's actually a lot of canon stuff in that show that's pretty cool. That's one of the reasons why I watched it. It only lasted, I think, 2 seasons, but it was pretty cool. It was definitely for kids, though. It would be really hard for a lot of people, I think, to watch it. And you can't be a casual fan that has no kids and watch that show, probably. You almost have to be somewhat of a canon junkie in order to do it. And even then, it might test. But then you had the flip side of this, right? Where you can do Star Wars that's predominantly or totally for adults. And one of the things that I think is cool about that is you would get these things like, say, the Book of Boba Fett, which was kind of dark and more adult-like. But then there's that one episode where he's chasing that little droid around and it gets all slapsticky. And you know, that was obviously a scene put in to appeal to kids. But it's out of place. It's out of place and when you're surrounded with this theme of darkness and stuff, and then you have this tough character or whatever suddenly acting goofy. And that's where I start to have issues. It's like you have to pick a tone. It takes you out of it. Yes, it totally takes you out of it.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like I liken it to for those of you who may be, you know, wrestling fans, WWE, right? So Vince McMahon had this whole policy where, like, he kind of wanted his characters to always be in character, right? Even in their own personal lives. And so even somebody like, you know, the very popular Undertaker, right? Like, you know, he's been this dark, you know, I mean, he's dark, this dark, grisly, you know, tone to him where he's practically walking around basically claiming to be like the undead almost, right? So even in his personal life, like people see him at the airport and what have you, like he was still dressing all black, wear dark shades, you know, he would have his hair down. He would still kind of maintain that Undertaker physique, even in his own personal life. And that really helped people sell. It helped sell his character when he popped up on, you know, Monday Night Raw or whatever wrestling show he was on, you know, and it really helped that character really become iconic the way that it is. And I think that's kind of what you're saying too, is like, okay, if we know Darth Vader to be this powerful, dark, sinister, almost like, you know, just juggernaut, you don't want to see him, you know, at a table. Like, funny thing happened at the Death Star today. He's cracking jokes like, that's so out of character for him. It doesn't fit. And that would completely remove everything that, or unravel everything that we've always seen about Darth Vader. You know, like, as Anakin, yeah, we could see that, you know.
Yeah. But I mean, and that's why a lot of people, and I go back and forth on it, but that's why a lot of people had problems with that, you know, don't choke on your ambitions line in Rogue One.
Oh.
Because it was too much like a pun. It seemed a little bit outside of what Vader normally would do, because normally his stuff is sinister, and sometimes there's a little bit of a dark humor twist to some of the things that he says, but that was really on the nose, though.
Yeah, I could kind of see it, but I mean, I think they were trying to make that connection to, you know, I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Well, that's what I mean, though. They tried too hard, and that's the problem. And that's the problem I've been having with Disney Star Wars. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things I love about it too, but, you know, I mean, granted, Lucas did put the Ewoks and all this stuff in, and he tried to appeal equally to adults and children, but, you know, it's just, I think in some ways, and this is what I love about what's happening now. You know, I just wish that Disney didn't have to experience so much before they finally learn the lesson. And there are many lessons to learn. One of them is make sure that you plan. Plan your projects. You know, another thing, which I wish they would learn, which kind of gets into the Rogue Squadron thing, is make sure you're going to release something before you go announcing it and putting out all this marketing. I mean, I've never seen another studio that keeps promising us all this stuff and then they remove things off of the schedule for some reason. And it's all because, and a lot of people have theorized that this whole Rogue Squadron thing it was very similar to the Colin Trevorrow thing. I forgot the name of the movie that Colin Trevorrow did that spooked Disney, but there was some movie that he had released, and it kind of freaked him out, and they're like, yeah, I don't know, maybe this isn't the guy. Let's give JJ a call. And of course, they were all about Patty Jenkins until Wonder Woman 84 came out. And, I mean, credit where credit's due. It was not a good movie. It was a terrible follow-up to The Amazing Wonder Woman. But at the same time, you can't... It's kind of like if there's something that appealed to you about this particular director or whatever, then have faith in that. You shouldn't necessarily let what happened with another movie, because you don't know the circumstances. Well, they might, because Marvel's under the same umbrella as Lucasfilm, under Disney. But so there is a little bit of an inside information there. But I don't know. I just think that it seems like they're in some ways second-guessing themselves. I don't know if you get that impression or not, but especially with this Rogue Squadron thing, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I just said what's up with Star Wars, because I think there's just a lot of stuff, like all the articles that you had sent me over the last couple of days, and I know that the new Ezra casting was a big one that we said, but I started to think about it, that there's just all this stuff that's going on. And by the way, I will still get to my thoughts on Ezra, what he's doing after Return of the Jedi. But I just wanted to bring in all this stuff into the discussion, also so the people that are online right now can discuss it, and anybody that's watching the rebroadcast, because we did get a couple of new subscribers. I want to thank the people who have subscribed and encourage anybody else that hasn't already done so to subscribe, because the more people that we have on here, the better the discussion. That's true with the live chat especially. So whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this after the fact at a later time, there's just a lot of stuff right now that you can unpack when it comes to all these things that are happening with Star Wars. So I wanted to pretty much bring some of this stuff into that conversation and get everybody talking about it while we actually deal with some of the specifics. Particularly, the two things that we chose to focus on, although there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now. But two of the things that we can focus on is finally the casting of Ezra, because that is a big deal. I mean, that's something that's been in the rumor mill for a long time, and it's been speculated to the point to where it's almost been assumed to be true. I mean, it's kind of like the official announcement doesn't really surprise anybody. It's like people are just kind of like, well, of course.
Yeah, we knew Ezra had to be in there. It's just who was going to do it. Right?
Well, and that's it. That was it, too. It's who is actually going to play him. And, of course, the Mina Massoud thing, that was a really strong rumor to the point where everybody just assumed. Because if you think about it, he was rumored just as strongly as Rosario Dawson was when she was rumored to play Ahsoka. So the fact...
Mikkelsen as Thrawn.
Right, but that hasn't been confirmed yet either. At least to my knowledge.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't, but that's what I'm saying. Like, everybody's basically saying, like, at first it was saying he was going to do it, then it was like, well, he didn't confirm it, so it's not. Now everybody's talking about he's going to do it again. So it's one of those things that people feel so strongly about, as far as him playing. They want him to play that character.
And I mean, I get it too. I mean, the fans in some ways, as much as we as fans complain about Lucasfilm and Disney and everything about these cast announcements, you can understand why. I mean, it's almost like a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, because if all these rumors are coming out and it's more or less strong-arming Disney into making an announcement, and then something falls through and they have to change casting or fire a director or whatever, it's kind of like, it's almost like the fandom actually somewhat forced their hand in a way. Or maybe some overzealous Disney employee decide to leak something, and then they have to decide whether or not they want to address it directly or just kind of let it go and let it be more heavily speculated. But if they do announce somebody, and it doesn't work out, then of course they get jumped on for that too. So I sympathize in a way, that they're in somewhat of a predicament. But I always say, at some point, it's almost like parents. As much as you want to be a friend to your kid, sometimes you have to know, look, I got to be a parent. It's kind of sucks. I don't really want to do it, but I got to do it. Got to let the kids say that they hate me and they'll never speak to me for the rest of their lives and slam their door and all that stuff. And as hard as that may be for a parent to do, you have to do it in order to be a parent. That's just a responsibility. And when you're a studio, yes, you want to make the fans happy because they're the ones that are ultimately paying the bills on this thing. But you also have to know that, look, we're the professional filmmakers here. So sometimes we have to make decisions and do things that you as the fan may not think is right, or maybe it doesn't make sense to you at the time, but you're just going to have to trust us. And if that vision ultimately turns out to be wrong, well, that's art. That's the subjectivity of art. It's kind of like if you make a decision and it works, excuse me, you look like a genius. And if that same decision fails, well, then you look like an idiot. And the only difference, it's the same decision. The only difference is, did it work or did it not work? So
yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it is a hard thing to do, and a lot of times, yeah, you do. I mean, it's no different than like you said, being a parent or anything like that. Like sometimes you try to make the decisions in the best interest of your kids. And Star Wars being almost like a child to them. Because they have to nurture it, they have to make sure it's developing the way that they want it to develop. And I think that's the hard part, and of course everybody has their own opinions and thoughts on what it should be, what it shouldn't be. What you have to do what's best for your franchise. However, like, I completely agree with you though. It's like, I think that you do have to take into consideration though, how this looks to people in the sense of the overall, like, okay, you're giving me something and then you're taking it from me. It's like you're being an Indian giver, right? Since we're keeping things all kid-like, right? So, we got chastised for that. Like, okay, well, you can't give someone something and then take it back to all of a sudden because you want it back. And I think that's what's happening with us with Star Wars. It's like, okay, you're giving fans all this hope and this excitement. And you're building us up for this thing. And like, oh man, I can't wait for Rogue Squadron. It's going to be like this drama thing. It's like Star Wars meets Top Gun and all this type of stuff. And so then now I was like, okay, well, now we saw the success of Top Gun Maverick. So everybody's really anxious to see this whole Star Wars Top Gun basically. And then now it's not happening. And it's like, well, what the heck? I wanted to see this. You got me primed and excited to see this, and so now I don't know what to believe from you anymore. And that's what's happening with fans. It's like the fans don't know what to believe with Star Wars anymore. Like, okay, is this show happening? Is it not? Is this person going to be in it or they're not? Is this person directing it or they're not? And it's kind of like, where's the consistency with within the franchise to where we as fans can feel comfortable? Like, okay, like the hardcore fans are going to go see Star Wars win, lose, or draw. That's just us, because it's no different. Those of us who live in who happen to be Lions fans, we're Lions. We're going to watch the game because they're the Lions. Like, we're going to watch them, even though, we don't know if they're going to win or lose. I mean, most times we kind of know how it's probably going to end up, but whatever. We're still with our team though till the end because that's our team. And, some years are better than others. We get it, but we always hope for the best. But at least we need to have some sort of consistency in order to, like, okay, this is what we can expect. And I think that's the part that we're seriously lacking in from Lucasfilm and Disney, is that we can't trust you right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up, the whole Top Gun thing too, because you would think that the success of Top Gun would actually encourage them to, hey, maybe we better move the release date up and capitalize on this a little bit. I don't understand why Disney will sometimes make the decisions that they make, and in a lot of times it is at the expense of their own fandom. it's kind of like you said. Not only did they talk about Rogue Squadron, they marketed the thing heavily. They put it on its celebration. They were doing these little profiles on Patty Jenkins and her father, and how he was fighting in the war and all this stuff. And I mean, they really went all out to do it, and then all of a sudden, it's gone. I mean, it doesn't even seem to be postponed. Now, you guys in the chat or whatever, or maybe if you want to comment later or whatever, you can. But I don't think it's been moved anywhere or anything like that. I think it's just been completely taken off of the release schedule. And as far as what we see now, looks like we're not getting an actual movie until 2025. And by the way, we still don't know what that's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the disheartening thing. Is like I said, we don't really know where we are. Pardon me for all my analogies today, but it's just.
Well, you know what? Sometimes that's the best way to present stuff, though.
But yeah, it's kind of like that relationship, right? You're kind of dating, and you're like, okay, are we official? Are we not?
Yes, that's a
we're
good
acting
example.
like we're official, but we're not. And it's, you can kind of see like, okay, well, if I need to just move on, let me just, do that. But I need to know, and that's kind of how, like I said, once again, we feel as Star Wars fans. We want to understand. We don't have to have all the details. Of course, we want them, but we understand if you don't have them all fleshed out. But you need to have like, okay, this is locked down. This is okay. We're doing this. We're moving forward with it. No questions asked. Now, we may have to change a director or two, but the project is still going forward. Like, we have our story. We know what we want to tell. We just might need to find the best person to direct it. We thought it was this person. They're not available, whatever the situation is. Okay, but we're moving forward with the story. At least give us that. But then it's like, okay, when you're taking whole projects off the table now that you, like you said, highly publicized. I mean, I remember they did that whole thing where Patty Jenkins was like in the whole X-Wing fighter, and she climbed into an X-Wing. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing. I was like, okay, like bring it on.
Yeah,
and
I mean, they got the fans excited. Exactly. When you get the fan, this is where the danger comes in. It's not so much, hey, we're having some problems, or we need to do something. You spend the time plucking the emotional heartstrings of the fans. The extremely volatile, fragile fan base, I might add. Right? You've already been letting them down. It's kind of like, I mean, look, now it's my turn. I'll do the analogy thing. Basically, Star Wars fans are like the abused woman. Right? The husband keeps beating him up. Says, you know what? I'm sorry. Look, I mean, they'll never happen again. Look, I mean, I'm gonna make it right this time. I'm gonna change. I'm gonna do all this stuff. And then they beat the woman up again. And then they gave him the same line again. And it's like, how many times does this poor woman have to try to believe and say, well, maybe it's real this time? And that's kind of where we're at as fans right now.
Yeah, to add on to that point, it's like, because what keeps that woman around a lot of times is that because he does enough good in between the situations. So when we get shows like Andor, when we get shows like, Mandalorian, when we get shows that really are like, okay, this is really cool. We might Tales of the Jedi might be another one of those, Bad Batch, things that are really done well. It's like, okay, once again, it slowly starts to restore your faith. And then something like this happens again, and then it's like,
we get beat up again.
Yeah,
it's
we get
basically
beat up
the
again.
TV shows are when the guy's like doing good and kind of being cool, and then movie comes out, and that's when the beating hits. And you can't continue to run a franchise by doing that to your fan base. The other thing that I would suggest that Lucasfilm and Disney stop doing is stop trying to appeal to the casual fans in order to maximize your profits or something. That's going to work against you. That's one of my biggest problems, because Lucas actually didn't try to appeal to any fan. ultimately he was doing his vision, and then if other people liked it too, that was great. And they were basically passion projects for him. You know, he was just pretty much releasing movies as an independent filmmaker. And okay, I mean, it's not like he totally ignored the fans. I mean, he did do some fan service type of things. For the prequels especially, he started bringing in some concepts and characters from the expanded universe that was out at the time. But by and large, he didn't really listen to the fans. You know, the fans would want some, and he'd be like, Disney, on the other hand, because a lot of the people were fans of Star Wars, it's almost like they're trying to take it from the standpoint of, we're the fans trying to appeal to the fans and making it a fan-first thing. But what you're doing is a complete disservice to the entire franchise by doing that. And if you're going to appeal to the fans, appeal to the hardcore fans.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, you know, if you look at anything like that has source material, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, you know, they made those movies for those fans. Like people who were really hardcore. Now, if you just happen, like people say, oh man, did you see Harry Potter? Oh, what's a Harry Potter? Oh, well, you know, check this out. And then it's like, oh, okay, Twilight is another one. Like, okay, I didn't give a crap about Twilight. I thought it was a bunch of it's basically like vampires and werewolves meets Degrassi or something like that.
Yeah,
Beverly Hills 90210. Like,
I'll keep quiet
I didn't
about
care.
this one.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, because I felt...
But I didn't care. But it's
Eric
like...
Van Zyl
I
once felt as you do. Just saying.
No, but I did too. I mean, I didn't care. I thought Twilight was stupid. It was some little teen thing. And it's like, okay, a bunch of little girls weeping over Edward and Jacob or whatever. But then I actually was bored one day and actually happened to catch it. And I was like, well, you know what? The story of it is actually pretty cool. And I actually but that's what caught me. It was the story. It was like, okay.
Yeah, same here.
I mean, I kind of forgot the fact that there's a bunch of little teenagers running around. It was more so like, what is the story trying to do?
It wasn't really handled that way. Yeah. I mean, the thing for me, I was kind of forced into watching it, sort of. Like, I was over at some friend's house, and they were going to watch Twilight. And the idea was to laugh at it, really. And it was really more, especially the first one, there's a lot of really wooden dialogue that made the prequel trilogy look astounding by comparison. But it's kind of like you said. I mean, the story, though, was really cool. And the inventive way that they put a spin on the whole vampire thing and then the werewolf versus vampire thing, it was cool. And what it did was, and this is what a good story will do a lot of times, you'll start to overlook some of the weaknesses in, I guess, the filmmaking process. Because a lot of times, you know, people say, well, they're plot holes. Maybe. More often than not, what's happening is somebody will write a complete script, and that script will actually make a lot of sense, but then when they start shooting it, they start cutting scenes for budgetary purposes or things like that, and so what you're left with might actually create some plot holes when in essence the original script didn't have any. So you have to look at it like that. Okay, so now we got Voyager chats in. He says, what I want to know is why the creative team lie to the media and say they didn't use the volume. Genevieve O'Reilly confirmed they did and stagehands on Twitter too. Okay, now I didn't necessarily see that, so I can't answer that definitively, but just assuming that all this is accurate, which, I mean, if it's actors and stagehands that were there and they tweeted it out, I guess there's no reason it wouldn't be. But it's probably because maybe what they were saying was they didn't rely solely on the volume like a lot of the other shows did.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it too. Like, and I think if I'm not mistaken, are you talking about Andor?
Yeah, he's talking about Andor.
So I think what they were saying is like the volume wasn't used solely or heavily as the center point, like Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett or something like that.
Yeah, in
But I'm
fact,
not
they
saying it
probably
wasn't.
just maybe
Some scenes
used it.
probably
Yeah, they
will
probably just
probably
use
because
it
they
for some
had to.
scenes. Right.
Hmm.
You know, whereas most of it, like 90% of it was, you know, um, so he says, but Tony Gilroy said they didn't use it at all. Same with one of the producers. That was a lie. Straight up lying to the media.
Well, I mean, and that may be true. I mean, no pun intended, but um, uh, unless the only caveat I can say is at the time in which they asked the question, they hadn't used the volume, and maybe they shot some scenes where they eventually had to use the volume after that interview took
Yeah.
place.
Yeah,
That's the only way I
because,
can really see a
well,
way out
no,
of that.
nope,
Otherwise, I'll
that's a good
completely
point.
agree with you, Voyager.
Sure. I mean, I would too. Look, I mean, we just spent the last nearly an hour tearing on Lucasfilm, so we're certainly not defending them. But you do bring up a good point, because even if the interview was released last week, a lot of times these interviews are conducted months, before, and then they're finally released. Sometimes what they'll do is, if you catch something on the internet too, you really have to look at the date the article was written, because stuff will pop up in my Google News feed, and it'll appear like it's a new article, but in reality, it was actually written like 4 months ago, sometimes even longer. There's a guitar player that I really love that he's kind of reclusive, and they did a recent interview in, I think, the latest issue of Guitar World. But the interview was conducted in like 2019 or something, or maybe even a little earlier. It might have been 2017. So you never really know when a lot of these interviews were conducted, and that could explain why. And the only reason why I'm even willing to entertain this, instead of just add it to the list of complaints that we have, is because there really wouldn't be any purpose served by lying about that. They're very proud of the volume. The volume is actually a really cool technical marvel, and I could say this being kind of in that field, because what they're doing is they're taking the Unreal Engine, which is usually used for gaming, they're combining it with the current LED wall technology, and they're using it in conjunction, which is two technologies that have existed but never really put together. And so they're really proud that they've come up with this thing. So, they're not trying to hide the fact. Now, granted, I know that they did make a big deal about the fact that, hey, we're not shooting on the volume. This is real sets. We're gonna try to give you a cinematic experience. So then if they do turn around and do stuff on the volume, okay, there I could see them maybe trying to save face and, yeah, we didn't use the volume. And but in a lot of ways, though, it's kind of like you said, it may not necessarily be lying if the interview was conducted before they, in fact, actually did use the volume.
So what they said is true from a
certain point of view. Now, here's the question, though. Would you personally, I mean, what are your feelings on a lot of these series that are shot predominantly on the volume?
Personally, I feel like it should be used like anything else, like any other special effect when it's necessary. I think there's something to be said about using real life environments, sets. It brings a certain realism to it. It brings authenticity, all of those things. So I'm cool with that. I understand for budgetary reasons, though. And this is, with us being in this industry now, it's like I understand things from a business standpoint, and I understand things from a technological standpoint, where it's like, okay, yeah, if I can recreate something and I don't have to spend money flying crew halfway across the world or whatever to this island or to this little place to get this look, when I can just have my tech team create it in this bubble pretty much, and I get the same look for the most part, why not?
Well, I'll give you a good example too. So this this kind of I mean, being that you've only been working at the shop for a month now, back during the COVID times, right, when we had to start doing stuff virtually,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even Doug occasionally, you know how he hates the whole Zoom and web and all that stuff. You know, he wants the highest end cameras, and I can't wait to get back into ballrooms and all that other stuff. But even he occasionally, you know, was kind of nice. I mean, you could do these big multicam type productions virtually when all you're doing is walking into, you know, a room in your office. And I mean, obviously we have all this gear, so we're still using the same amount of gear that we would use almost in a live production. But it's just great that you're not going anywhere. You're not having to load this stuff into trucks and, you know, and take it out somewhere and then go set it up. And then, you know, you have to strike it and put it back on a truck and take it back. I mean, you know, and especially like for a lot of stuff, you just basically flip the switches and leave. And you could even leave it set up, and you could just get up from your desk and get a cup of coffee and and just walk over and do a production and walk away. I mean, there's something to be said for that kind of simplicity. So with the volume, I think there is an ease of use. Now, Dwight has a couple of comments here. He says, doesn't the volume just replace the matte art as far as the background? Yes and no. Because I think the volume also, I don't know if they have an LED floor. I know what they usually do is they'll build some of the set stuff. They'll use some green screen stuff to where they'll cover certain things in green and then replace it, like as far as stuff on the ground. And then yes, but so it's kind of replacing the green screen in the sense of with green screen, you're having to put markers everywhere. The actors have to act and, okay, pretend you're in a desert and really you're just in this big green room and there's nobody else there. Whereas using this LED technology with the Unreal Engine, that when the camera moves, the background will dynamically change. And this is how you get this stuff in games. I mean, when you're playing all these games and your character moves and looks a certain way, and the background is reacting dynamically as if it were in the real world, that's how you're getting this. So all they did was they combined this with a bunch of LED walls and things like that. So now the actors are actually seeing the environment. They're interacting with things. They can, it's a little bit better. So it's a little, I guess from a simplicity standpoint, yeah, you can almost say that it's basically just replacing green screen or matte backgrounds, like the painted, backgrounds, which were also kind of cool. I mean, one of the things that I love about watching old movies is I loved the matte paintings, these giant background paintings that they would have, and that's one of the things I just absolutely love about older movies, because it kind of has this sort of its own little world, kind of a play type of feel. I mean, there's just something about it that's appealing. But it's like you said, though, if you could get out there, sure, there's more work on the front end. But, if you look at when they went to Tunisia to shoot a lot of the Tatooine scenes in the 70s, right? It's brutal. It's 100 and some degrees. Anthony Daniels is almost passing out because he's in that 3PO suit. And it was, everybody that was on that crew said it was the most miserable experience you can possibly imagine. But here we are, 40 some odd years later. Nobody regrets it because the work that they put into making those scenes the way they were has stood the test of time. And so you sometimes I think you have to look at the immediate, well, I should say it the other way. Don't look at the immediate gratification. Think of the long term. So a little bit more production, a little bit more planning. Yes, it's more work. Yes, it's more expensive. But the payoff is, look, this is forever, it's going to stay on your channel and people are going to watch this 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something to be said, and there is a certain level of I will even venture to say it's more artistry to do it live on real set because you have to deal with real elements, which really shows that you know your craft so well. Because it's like you have to work within real life situations and conditions and make this stuff look good, and work well. And I think that from a production standpoint, yes, it's harder. Yes, it's more difficult. Um, but I think, like you said, the payoff on it is like, okay, well, this is a skill set I've had to learn. I mean, Eric, it's like certain things that we've even had to do. Is like, okay, well, how do I make this happen in this situation, in this condition? It's not designed for this, but how do I make it work? And you do it, and it's like, oh, okay, I can file that away now. I have a new skill set. I have something else I've learned, and I can add that to my repertoire of things that that travel with me to the test to the end of time. So yes, I believe that the volume has its place. I think it's cool, especially when you have multitude of shows like Star Wars is trying to release. That's the other thing. They got multiple shows that they're trying to put out here. So it's like,
Yeah.
all right, budgetarily wise, it's like, okay, do I not want to pay a crew of like 75 to 150 people going out and trying to do this, or can I just get 30 people in a volume to do the same thing? It saves me as a production company money, and I can create um more shows. I can create more movies. I can do more things. With the money that I saved, I can pay people more because I don't have so much overhead. So from a budgetary and a business standpoint, I totally get it. And even from a technology standpoint, once again, this is how things move forward. Like look at what George Lucas did with miniatures back in the 70s, creating all this stuff with just miniatures. Because we could have got the old typical Flash Gordon, things being suspended by, a little piece of dental floss or something
Well,
like
it's
that.
not even
and now
that
we got all
because
this
it's not.
this
That's
technology
actually
that's been created.
well, some of it. He didn't actually create a lot of the miniatures, so because even Bankin and Rance was doing all the stop animation stuff. Where what was really where the miniature thing and all that stuff was revolutionary for the first Star Wars movie was the camera movements because
Right.
usually if they would show a space thing, they would have a model just fly across a stationary camera or something. Whereas Lucas and his team basically invented this whole thing to where the model would move and then the camera would move, and they had this crazy revolutionary thing. But there's so much to unpack with this. So like another good example is Jaws. Jaws,
I was thinking about that too.
Spielberg really wanted to shoot that on the water, like in the middle of the water. He wanted to give it the most realistic flair that you can possibly do. But the problem is, it was, especially back then, I mean, even now it's true, but back then it was really true, is that it was really difficult and expensive to really shoot on the water. Not in a tank or something like that, but to go out in the open ocean and actually shoot all these scenes. And sometimes it can actually benefit the movie. Because, for instance, one of the shark was actually supposed to be shown a lot more in that movie. But they couldn't get it to work. And so they had the idea of using those floating barrels, and had the barrels pop up when the shark was there. And that turned out to actually improve the movie and make it way more dramatic. So sometimes the cost savings or the things that most people would refer to as cutting corners actually can lead to better business decisions. Now, Voyager has this comment. He says, Obi-Wan was in the top 10 Nielsen charts throughout its run, between number 3 and number 5. You think Andor will also chart? I definitely think
Yes.
that it probably will. Now, I understand the question, though. Because Obi-Wan is a popular, legendary, been with us, cultural icon type of a character. Andor has been in one film and hasn't really been marketed that much. But I will say this, is that the marketing for this show has been huge. And I think that people are starting to catch on that, there's this live-action Star Wars is a thing. I mean, it's not just when The Mandalorian came out, it was new. People didn't really know. It's kind of like, wait a minute, is this a movie? Is this But now I think that Andor is basically the 4th series now that's live action.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people are getting a sense of it and people are understanding.
Yeah, and I think the subject matter of what it is, and I think the fact that people are going to be talking about it so much, I think that's what's really going to make a lot of people. And because, like, it's a Star Wars movie, but you don't have the typical or the expected, Star Wars trinkets, the Force, lightsabers, all that. It's more, like I said, it's grounded. I'm trying not to take another shot. So it's
Yes, don't
it's
say
a
gritty, don't say real.
but it's because it's dealing um with the perspective of what is everybody else dealing with? How is everybody else um battling with what's going on? And then there's the whole political landscape. It's the character development. I think that's what's really going to make people really like, okay, you know what? This is interesting. People want to see good stories. You see people all the time. What's a good show on Netflix? What's something I should be watching on
Yes.
whatever? And it's like people are asking about
Yes.
that, but and it's because they want to see something, a good story. They want, and that's what everybody talks about. Like, oh man, this is so good, man. The story, like, it has so many twists and turns, or man, this ending was amazing, or whatever the case may be. Even Cobra Kai, right? That's another one that everybody's kind of falling in love with because everybody loves the story and how it keeps growing. And each season, there's always something, new or that's happening within that show. And that's why people keep coming back, because they know what they do and they do it well, and they keep just upping the ante within the story.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that ultimately that's really the key. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
just really, when you boil it down, any show is going to be successful if it has 2 things: a really good story and buzz behind it. That's really what it takes. I mean, yes, you
Mm-hmm.
can expand on the production side. Does it have a good script? Is it executed well? Is the acting good and all that? But ultimately, if you were to just boil it down, because a
Mm-hmm.
good story, people can start to overlook the other stuff.
Yeah, like
You can
take Squid Game, right? A lot of people, saying don't want to sit there and read subtitles, but you did because the story was so compelling. And it's like, okay, well, what the heck crazy thing is about to happen now? It's like, that's why, people really got into that show, is because it was so different. It was so odd, kind of ominous, but the story was just like, okay, well, yeah, you get these gruesome murders, but why?
Well, yeah,
And
exactly.
that's
It's like,
when
how's this going to end? Like, the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like,
exactly.
I have no idea how this is going to end. And that's part of
Yep.
storytelling, right? Create a mystery,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to keep watching it. And that's the point, being that a good story, if the story is good enough, you can actually, to a degree, overlook poor execution, although I would say that's the close second, is good execution. Because if you have good story, good execution, even if the acting's a little questionable, maybe, some of the cinematography isn't the best, you can overlook all that. But you can have the best acting, best cinematography, all that stuff, and if the story isn't good, nobody's going to care. It might be
Mm-hmm.
pretty, but nobody's going to care. Now, conversely, the other thing that you need is buzz, because there's a lot of good stories, a lot of good movies that don't do anything, don't go anywhere because nobody knows about it. It never catches on. So basically, I'm just saying, if you boil it down to its elemental level, right? If you have a good story and you have good marketing behind that, and you can create some sort of a buzz,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna catch on, and people are gonna enjoy
Absolutely.
it. And that's basically what Andor is gonna have. And it's like you said, it's gonna give people a little bit of a different vibe on Star Wars. It's gonna get the buzz because when we started the show, you were talking about, hey, here's a bunch of first reactions from this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to read that. People are going to be curious. So I'm hoping that these are just a little bit of bumps in the road. This Rogue Squadron thing is kind of weirding me out, but I don't know. So what I want to know from you guys is a couple of things. I mean, obviously, you can talk about anything that we've mentioned in the show or anything. I mean, even if you guys want to suggest a topic idea, that would be cool too. Because, look, we want to talk about what you guys want to talk about too. So if you have an idea for a topic or something you want us to cover on a near future show, then let us know. But the two things are, what do you think of the Ezra Bridger casting? Which, by the way, I promised that I would talk about this. Where I think he's going to be is we're going to see a little bit of the effect of how Thrawn's influence has actually affected him. Because I think that when Ahsoka goes and looks for him, now I don't know when we're going to find him. I don't know if their stories are going to run parallel, where Ahsoka's looking for him, and then you see Ezra, and it's kind of like, they near misses, and they almost connect or whatever, and then finally they connect, or is this something that's going to happen relatively quickly in the first season? We don't know. But what I think is going to happen is you're just going to see the effect of all the events. I'm hoping that they reference the original trilogy in some ways too, because we do have to know, well, where were all these people during the original trilogy, right? I mean, I don't necessarily need it acted out for me, but just some mentions of it would be good. But that's where I think he's going to probably be. So let us know what you think of the whole Ezra Bridger casting. Let us know what you think of this Rogue Squadron thing. Are we ever going to see it? So is it ever going to appear on the schedule? Why do you think that it's been taken off? What are you thinking of as far as the movies go? All right, so you have any final thoughts?
No, man. Like I said, I think I said everything I needed to say.
You got it all off your chest. This has been a good therapy session.
Right.
we want to thank you guys for letting us, talk about our frustrations on Lucasfilm. And hey, listen, I mean, if you agree or disagree with anything that we said, let us know in the comments. Again, this is a discussion. This isn't just a one-way thing. But of course, while you're there, while you're doing that, make sure you hit that like button so the YouTube algorithm is happy and puts us in front of more people. And hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss a show that we do. Now, we're usually live every Monday, every Friday at 8. It was a little past 8 today, but generally speaking, every Monday and Friday at 8. Not sure what we're going to cover Monday. I do know on one of the Monday shows, I wouldn't mind doing the top 5 possible villains that we might see in the Book of Boba Fett. That was something I ran across an article, and I didn't really agree. I mean, one of the people he was saying was like Aura Singh. It's like, dude, she's dead. It's like, come on. But it did get me to thinking, though. It's like, that wouldn't be a bad topic, though, and it might be of interest to everybody else. Now, as you pointed out, we're getting Andor next Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult for me because what's going to happen is normally we review all the shows on Mondays. So we're going to have to... We
got Tales of the Jedi right after that, though.
We do have Tales of the Jedi, don't we?
Mm-hmm. A couple of days right after. Yeah, so it's...
Oh, that's right. Oh, man, yeah. So we're probably going to have to...
That's probably going to be a review show for both, honestly.
Yeah, it might be. It might be.
Unfortunately, Tales of the Jedi is only 6 episodes, so...
Yeah, that's true. Well, then maybe what we can do is we can do the Andor thing on Fridays, because that would be just 2 days after. And then maybe do the Tales of the Jedi on Mondays. That might be a good way to do it. But let us know what you guys think, as usual. So I guess, I don't know. We don't know what we're going to talk about Monday, but you'll probably know Sunday because we'll announce it. All right, so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.